Well, we made it. We got the end of the regular season, and now we've got playing games and playoffs coming here with the NBA Tip-Off Show powered by WagerTalk.com. What is your favorite team heading into the next 48 hours? Because it's a little bit weird that on Tuesday we're going to have not one but two teams and two games from the West, and then both East teams on Wednesday. But there's a very good reason for that. And it probably has to do with the fact that Bryan Power's on this show and all hell has broken loose at this point here. Gentlemen, welcome in. Double R1L, Steve Merril in the house here. LeBron taking a page out of the Fountain of Youth there, having a good time, playing out of his mind. The Lakers rolling in here. So we got a lot to go over with these play-in games over the next 48 hours. But we'll start with the fact, BP, we were just talking about it. You got two West games coming up tomorrow, and then two East, and you're going, why? Wait, isn't it usually one East, one West? Don't they do that on the play-ins? Well, as it turns out, who knew the Flyers are the ones that get precedent over the Sixers, even though the Flyers are going to be on a golf course in a couple of days. Apparently, they have to play that game, and the Sixers had to be pushed back into Wednesday. So that's why we've got two West teams going at one another, BP. I would have never thought the Flyers would ever play that kind of role in anything outside of, all right, you know what, why don't we just count it as an L and we'll move on and the Sixers can go from there. But two West, two East games coming up. Very strange.
Yeah, I wonder, why do the Sixers have precedent? I'm not full disclosures. People know I'm not an NHL person, so I don't know. Like, what game was there? Some sort of coin flip that took place when they built the building that the Flyers won, and they get the edge. That's very. I mean, I guess because their season has to end, the play-in tournament is a thing that's kind of random. And who would have thought? I mean, I guess it wouldn't have been an issue if Indiana or Orlando would have lost on Sunday. But those are the breaks, and that's what we have. I think it's a pretty good play-in tournament for. All the hand wringing. I think it's kind of funny, Joe and Steve. The NBA regular season, does it go too long? Maybe it does. And it's to eliminate 10 teams. We've only said bye to 10 teams so far, 8 of which absolutely stunk. I'll let you use the hot A term, Joe, that you always like to bring up for some of those teams. But there's 8 of the 10 teams who didn't even make it to this thing, had no chance anyway. They were garbage. So, but we got some good matchups the next 2 days. I'm looking forward to it. I've got a 5% play already up, WT.buzz/BP. So I am looking forward to not only Tuesday, but Wednesday and having a good playoffs.
All right, I love it. All right, so what we're going to do here is we'll touch base on a couple of these games, see if we can come up with an angle here for you on a few of them, and maybe talk about how to approach the NBA playoffs here, Merril, because it's not like the regular season. It's a little bit different approaching the NBA right now. It's the same thing in the NHL. I know Carmine and Andrew were talking about this earlier today. What is your approach when it comes to the NBA? I have a feeling zigzag might be in play here, maybe at a time or two for you.
Well, first of all, when Teddy's on later this week, don't tell him the zigzag works. He gets very upset when you say that.
I know, he's very, for
several years now. So what you have to say is, and Teddy's a politically correct guy, probably more so than most of us on WagerTalk.com. He's very careful with what he says all the time. The modified zigzag is what works best. And Ralph Michaels just finished up his trends and stat report for the NBA playoffs today on Monday. We're going to try to get together and do a video with him at some point this week. Those of you that watched the show last Thursday, Ralph and I did a show here, and we talked a lot of technicals, so I think that'll be a lot of fun. The zigzag does still work, but it's the modified zigzag. You got to pick your spots. What I look for is Class A teams, quality teams off a loss. I also like to look for misleading box scores. We talk about this a lot with second meetings in February in college basketball, but dig into those previous box scores. It's a 7-game series, so we get a lot of statistical numbers to work with. Sometimes teams shoots lights out from 3 or vice versa. They don't shoot well. The pace was slow, though. The odds makers still over and under adjust the lines from one game to the next a little too much, in my opinion. And it amazes me now, almost 30 years into doing this, how the same situations that have worked since the 90s continue to work. And I love the NBA playoffs. It's a consistent moneymaker. Last year, I was 29-17 in the NBA postseason at WagerTalk. And number one this year in NBA, number one all time at Wager Talk in the NBA, and the playoffs are definitely a big part of that.
Yeah, no, they are, and it's kind of funny too, because we want to know from those of you that are joining us live here today in the chat rooms. We appreciate you, but what is the team of the future bet you have made here? Drop it in the comments as well, because this is another part, BP, of the playoffs in the NBA that is so much fun, because you get to have and try to find some middles, whether it's be length of the series winner. There's a lot of fun to be had from a betting perspective in the NBA playoffs. And the big question on a lot of people's mind is, all right, is there a dog maybe we can ride right to the end like we did in Miami last year, which absolutely nobody had? But my goodness, was that one profitable run last year at this time with Miami. Is there a team here that we can look to do exactly what we did last year with them?
Yeah, very interesting, Joe. With the play-in tournament, there were two teams that came out of the play-in tournament and made at least the conference finals. Miami obviously made it all the way to the NBA finals. The Lakers got to the Western Conference finals. I think Milwaukee got a bad draw against Indiana. And obviously the Giannis injury is no good, but Indiana, I believe, beat Milwaukee 4 out of 5 times in the regular season. So that's not a great matchup. You go to the West. The 3 seed over there, Minnesota, I'm not sure if they're too pleased that they drew Phoenix. Phoenix was kind of like Philadelphia, maybe the Philadelphia of the West, the lower seed that none of the teams wanted to draw. It sure seems that Dallas is a trendy team out West as well, doesn't it? If you're looking beyond the top seeds. Historically, the NBA playoffs have been dominated by the higher seeds. I mean, even though Miami did get to the NBA finals, it was Denver that won that won it all. But it's unique when you look at the West this year. I don't think anyone trusts the top seed, Oklahoma City. The 3 seed is a question mark.
Right.
The East, I'm not really loving a long shot, because the teams that I have power rated 2nd, 3rd, and 4th are likely to end up all on the opposite side of the bracket from Boston. I think things broke great for Boston. I find it hard to believe they're not getting to the conference finals, that they don't have just a walk-in, unless if maybe Philadelphia were to lose to Miami and they end up as the 8th seed. But I couldn't see Orlando or Cleveland beating Boston. So if you're looking for a series dog in round 1, I'll go back to the team I led with, Indiana over Milwaukee. I think you get Indiana plus 1.5 games still in that series, which, given how they did against the Bucks in the regular season, that seems like a pretty good deal to me.
Yeah, no, very good deal. I mean, Merril, we made a lot of money last NBA playoffs riding Miami. There were a lot of guys we knew that were going, it's going to end. Like, it's not. They can't. It's not. Jimmy Butler, no, it's not going to work. And yet it kept working. And when everyone was running left to fade them, those who ran right made a lot of money last year. What do you think? We talked about it in college, right? Same thing with UConn. A lot of people couldn't wait to fade you. Oh, they can't. There's no way. Is there a team here this year in the NBA that might follow a similar path, and how do you approach it?
Well, first of all, I think UConn and Boston Celtics would be the good comparison there. UConn was the dominant team for the whole 3 months leading to the tournament. They lost 1 game in all of 2024, and that was a bad scheduling spot at Creighton after the big Marquette win midseason there. I think a better analogy for Miami would be NC State. And I just happen to be wearing my dark burgundy Miami Heat shirt, I guess, here today, my NC State shirt, not my Wolfpack. They cost me a few losses until I finally got them there in the Final Four. But one thing I will point out about what Bryan said, the 2 teams that were in the play-in winners last year that made the run to the semifinals and the finals, the Lakers and Heat, yes, they underperformed during the regular season. But like you said, Joe, the Miami Heat had Jimmy Butler. They had a lot of the other guys from the championship game against the Lakers in 2020, the bubble season, which is ironic. And the Lakers also had that. They had Anthony Davis. They had LeBron James. So it's not like it was the Toronto Raptors or the Chicago Bulls that lost in the Eastern play-in last year. By the way, Oklahoma City Thunder lost the play-in round in the West. Now they're the number 1 seed. That's something interesting to point out. The Pelicans were the other team that lost the play-in round. They're also a team people think could be dangerous here. But yeah, I mean, the Heat and the Lakers had some championship pedigree and maybe Hall of Famer. I mean, LeBron, obviously, Davis and Butler, definite all-stars. You look at the play-in teams this year. I mean, from the East, once again, it's Miami and Philly. Obviously, Philly could be that team this season with the they finished tied for 5th, 6th, and 7th. They were all 17 back of the Celtics, but they lost the triple tiebreaker. Had they just won one of those 20, 30 games without Embiid, they could have been like a top 4 seed easy. So obviously Philly is better than a 7 seed. Miami, we just talked about them. They could make some noise again. They got that same supporting crew from last year. Bulls and Hawks, the 9-10 teams, don't see them doing it. But then we go out to the West again. The New Orleans Pelicans, who I just mentioned, one of the best road teams in the league, one of the best overall teams for a while this year. They had the injury late with Ingram, Zion in and out. They fell to 7th. They're just a couple games from being a top 5 or 4 seed. Lakers, we talked about them last year. They could obviously do it again. Sacramento, probably not at 9. But then Golden State, let's talk about the Warriors, the number 10 seed. I don't think anybody wants to play Golden State. You talk about championship pedigree more so than any of the teams we've talked about. Several possible Hall of Famers on that team, and obviously multiple championships. So, momentum is something we see more now in sports. We see the NFL wildcard teams make longer runs than they used to. We saw NC State do it. We saw UConn do it back in 2011. They were the only other team other than NC State to win 5 straight and then make a run to the Final Four. With that said, though, like Bryan also mentioned, the cream rises to the top in the NBA more than any other sport. And the reason is because baseball and hockey have 7-game series, but goalies and pitchers can dominate on an inferior team and carry a team. The NBA, it's a team sport, and the superstars are usually on the better teams on top of that. Boston, to put this in perspective, I talk about how Philly was 1 game out of the 3rd, 4th spot, 2 games out of the 3rd spot. They finished 7th. The 2nd seed, the Knicks, were 14 games behind the Celtics still. In the West, the top 3 within 1 game of each other. So I don't want to say it's obvious, but it's going to be very hard, I think, for anyone to knock Boston off. And also keep in mind, Miami was up 3-0 on them in the semis last year. And then Boston came to life and then got all the way to Game 7 and fell short. I don't want to use the Purdue analogy, but, once again, Purdue and Virginia both lost to 16 seeds, came back, made the finals the following season in college hoops. I feel like the Celtics might have that team with a chip on their shoulder. So, yeah, Boston has a real clean path to the finals this year.
Yeah, well, it's like we had mentioned that the Celtics' biggest enemy could be the Celtics this year. And I think that's what they got to fear the most, is shooting themselves right in the foot. And by the way, shout out to those of you. We're asking you, is there a Miami Heat this year that you can ride as an underdog right through to the finals here, whether it be conference or NBA? Who is that team for you? Do us a favor, drop it in the comments. Let's see which one of these teams you think might actually be that golden ticket this year. I see Anthony in the chat room is going Philly's the team for him. And I know there's a lot of people now with a rested Embiid with health think that could very well be the team that can ride its way maybe to beating finally the Boston Celtics. Have in there also thinks Orlando could very well be that team here that you can ride right through. But I do think maybe there are more teams this year that we would consider a possibility, certainly than we did last year, because we really did think Boston and Denver were the two. We thought the West was going to be crazy last year, and it turns out it was the East that was crazy. Denver ended up handling their business, but that's a whole different ball game. But the West does have a game. 2 games tomorrow. One with the Lakers, of course, are going to be involved against the Pelicans. But the Warriors, and Merril had mentioned there, BP, that who the hell wants to play the Warriors with that kind of experience here and the way they have been playing in the second half since the All-Star game. They were very fun last year in the, was it the first round I think they opened up with? I mean, my Lord, that was a lot of fun watching that take place here. What do we get in a 1-game situation here? Warriors, Kings. What do you think we're going to get here tomorrow night? An over?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. The Warriors, if they'll need to win twice to get in the playoffs proper. If they do, they're the 8th seed, and they'd be matched up against Oklahoma City. My goodness, I mean, you would have to imagine the Warriors would be about as quote-unquote public an 8th seed as you probably will ever see in the NBA playoffs. You remember last year when they were matched up with this same Sacramento team in the first round, I believe it was the first time in history that a 6 seed closed as more than a minus 200 favorite against a 3 seed. There was something historic in nature about those series odds. And remember, the Warriors did lose the first 2 in Sacramento before coming back and winning that series in 7 games. I'm not surprised that they're favored here, Joe and Steve, against the Kings. The Kings were a team I was adamant, whether it would be this show, Wager Talk today, just in my write-ups on my daily plays. I was adamant Sacramento wasn't finishing top 6. They were 10th in the conference in both net efficiency and point differential for the balance of the year. So the injuries down the stretch kind of hurt them. They did. I know they killed Portland on Sunday, but they didn't finish well. They lost 5 of the last 6 before that game. Portland obviously just mailed it in. They were making tea times as the game was going on, I believe. The Warriors, they closed fairly strong. They won 4 of 5. They weren't a great bet down the stretch, 1-5 ATS last 6, but you had to figure the Warriors would be a favorite here. And Joe, you touched on something when you threw it to me about the total. I know it's the playoffs, scoring slows down, but with these 2 games out west, I'm surprised to see how much money has come in on the under and how the numbers have moved down. You look at Golden State and Sacramento. I mean, these are Golden State averages 117, Sacramento averages 116. I mean, we're looking now at a total that's 223.5 regular season, guys. When these teams, and granted, it's been about 3 months since Golden State and Sacramento last met. The total closed 244 the last time these teams met. That's over a 20-point difference, obviously. So I do think that we're starting to see some value, particularly in that game, on the over. Golden State has scored 70 or more in the first half against Sacramento each of the previous 2 meetings. And oh, by the way, the last 3 meetings between those teams, all decided by a single point. So I guess a close game is to be expected.
Oh, well, that's you're so right about the interesting line movement that we've had there so far here. And I know over I'm seeing in the chat room as well for this one. Merril, the Kings, what's the word I'm looking for? Sucked down the stretch there. I think they lost 5 of the last 7 games. Their only wins came against, the G League Portland Blazers at home, and then the Brooklyn Nets, who had already quit a month and a half prior. So the Warriors are the better informed team, right? So how do you look at that? 10 of their last 12, I think, as a desperate team, they ended up winning. They've been playing playoff basketball for about a month now. So how much stock do you put into that in a game like this where one team limped to the finish line, but the other team, well, they've been rolling here now because they had no choice?
What's interesting is Golden State's won 4 of their last 5 games to finish the regular season, but they've gone just 1-5 ATS their last 6. So point spread wise, they haven't been playing great. They were only an underdog in 2 of those games. They lost to Dallas by 2, barely failed to cover, and they did win at the Lakers by 14 outright. So they still stepped up and played pretty well against the 2 playoff teams. And what's interesting also, the 7-game series last year, 5 of those 7 did stay under. And we always talk about how playoffs bring more defensive intensity. And Ralph Michaels did some numbers on that last week. Probably has it in his updated packet here for Monday as well on over-unders. But we do see the unders with Class A teams later in the playoffs cash more regular. So definitely would not be surprised to see a high-scoring game here. The biggest thing for me with Golden State, and by the way, point out once again the pedigree of this 10 seed. We all know the Nuggets won the championship last year. The year before that, the Warriors won their 7th title. So they just won the championship 2 years ago and have a lot of the same players still. So they are a dangerous team. They're playing extremely well. Down the stretch here, they won 10 of their last 12, and they're still only a 10 seed. But I'd much rather have the team in good current form. And as you said, Golden State is in much better current form. The Kings, rather, just 4-7 straight up their last 11. So really our 2 teams headed in opposite directions. And then on top of that, we get the better defensive team in Golden State. We get the better playoff caliber, experience level with Golden State. And, they're better on the road this year than at home. And that's one real big difference from last season is last year they had a strong home court, a terrible road numbers, one of the biggest home-road dichotomies I'd ever seen. Yep. And now this year has, without a question, been the biggest reversal I've ever seen as they're 25-16 on the road versus just 21-20 at home. And that's straight up 27-14 against the spread on the road, the best in the league. And that's another reason why they are favored in this one-and-done scenario. And this is a one-and-done, don't forget. The 9-10 team has to win. The loser goes home, whereas the 7-8 game, the other game in this bracket, the Lakers-Pelicans, the winner is automatically in. The loser then plays the winner of the 9-10 game. So I just don't see Golden State coming flat here. I mean, yes, Sacramento has a strong home court, but the Warriors have been the best road team in the league against the spread.
Yeah, and Sacramento was horrific, burning people's money and tickets at home in any situation this year. They weren't lighting anything but their ass on fire there, BP. It was not a very good season there. I'm just saying, I had to throw it out there. Shout out to Sean Evans in the house joining us here on YouTube. He already grabbed himself some Warriors there, laying the 2.5. And you're right, Merril. Their record on the road, especially post All-Star game, 12-4 on the road post All-Star game. Sacramento just 9-8 at home since the All-Star break as well. So it's kind of hard to look anywhere but at the Golden State Warriors in this one. And I know there's a few people in there in the chat rooms right now thinking the over maybe not getting enough credit in this one here. What do you got and who do you got in this game? Go ahead and drop that in the comments for us, as we want to thank LeBron James for not retiring 10 years ago, and he stayed in the league at age 55. Kudos to him. My goodness. I don't know what was. It's so funny because we're watching Tiger Woods over the weekend, BP, and like it hurt to watch him swing the golf club. Like I was like, yeah. Oh, good God, somebody give this guy like a heating pad and some Metamucil. But holy Christ, Tiger, what is going on here? He made the cut, but yeah. I mean, LeBron he's kicked it up a notch. The dude is out of control, and now he's got another opportunity here to keep playing postseason basketball, what he loves, with Anthony Davis. I looked at this game, and the first thing that I thought was, give me the points. I think LeBron is in score mode. I think Anthony Davis was in score mode. I think this is going to be maybe the highest scoring game of this play-in round over here. Do you agree? You expecting a ton of points in this one?
Well, yeah. I mean, the trends certainly point that way, Joe. Let's talk about the Lakers. 27-13 to the over on the road this year. And then these two teams, the Lakers and Pelicans combined in the month of April, are 12-3 to the over. They played 4 times in the regular season, including your favorite, the in-season tournament, Joe. We're going to include that one here for our records here. Every single one of those 4 games had a total close north of 230. So it's not quite the delta that we talked about with the last meeting between Golden State and Sacramento and what we've got tomorrow night. But it does seem like there's some value here on the over. The Lakers are not a particularly good defensive team. I'll say this. You talk about teams that were probably unlucky to drop into the play-in tournament. I'll throw the Pelicans there, Joe. They're the 7th seed in the West. They have the 6th best point differential in the league. Not just the conference, in the league. So, I mean, their net efficiency, I believe, was also 6th best. But, yeah, I mean, I think if you're talking about the total here, the trends do point to the over. The Lakers, over the last 5 games, have shot better than 50%. That sounds, unsustainable. But you look, they shoot basically 50% for the year. I believe they were number 2, maybe, in field goal percentage behind Indiana for the season. Mm-hmm. So, probably going to be points aplenty here between the Lakers and Pelicans tomorrow night.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like the Lakers, they did have that brief moment where we thought, all right, if the Lakers were going to win, then it was probably going to be an under here. But in this kind of situation where it's, hey, winner gets to move on, and, nobody wants to have to lose this game if you're the Pelicans or the Lakers. But I don't know. Are you expecting defense in this one, Merril? Because I'm thinking points are coming. I'm thinking wild shootout here in this one.
Well, the early money's expecting defense because this total opened as high as 228, even 228 and a halves out there. Mm-hmm. If you check the WagerTalk live odds screen, and now a day away, it's down to 223 and a half. So we've seen almost a 5-point move to the under. We saw that as well in that Golden State Sacramento game. They both opened around 228. They're both 223 and a half now. As I said earlier, playoff games do have more defensive intensity. In fact, on average, NBA playoff games for the past several decades have been a basket or so lower scoring than a regular season game. Yet matchups are still critical. One thing that jumps out to me about this game, a couple things. Bryan mentioned that excellent point about how New Orleans had, the 6th best scoring margin in the entire league. and they're not even a top 6 seed in their own conference. And that's what I kind of hinted at earlier when we were talking about how they're a dangerous play-in team. But then on the other side, you got the Lakers, who are obviously a championship caliber team with a Hall of Famer, that maybe the best player ever, and also a strong all-star, perhaps future Hall of Famer in Anthony Davis if he stays healthy and plays long enough. With that said, though, Pelicans much better on the road this year, which is what's interesting here. They're only 21-19 at home, and that's why they're a 7 seed. If they could have done anything at home this year, it's interesting. The Warriors are the same way. We got the two of the play-in teams. They had better road records than home records, which was really backwards. Lakers, meanwhile, 21-21 on the road versus 27-14 at home. So if LA does not win this game, and it's basically a 50-50 toss-up, they would get the next game on, I believe it's Thursday at home, or Friday against the 9-10 winner. So it'd be interesting. We could get the Lakers strong home court, likely against the Warriors, the strong road team. And you got to figure the league would not hate to see a Golden State Laker elimination game on Friday night national TV. Hashtag conspiracy theories. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, do not, and I mean do not, under any circumstances, give our viewers any reason to drink that Kool-Aid and start talking conspiracy, because it's already happening in the chat rooms here. Welcome in those crazies joining us here. Have Sean in the house. A Life in Vegas. Always a pleasure to see you guys. Cody in the house as well here. Shout out to those joining us here on Instagram, as well as Facebook, X, and YouTube Shorts here. And Zion, boy, oh boy, Zion. I know a lot of guys that are banking on Zion having a big night. 23.5 points, I think. BP is what I saw for him. And I got a lot of guys think that playoff Zion might be an interesting cat here. And I do think, I mean, what did he get up? 29, I think he put up against the Lakers in the regular season when they lost. I'll say this, if he's going to have a night, then the only way they're winning is if he has a night and can dominate somewhere in that paint and get over 23.5 total points.
Yes, I would concur with that. We also should not bury the lead here. These teams just played on Sunday with the Lakers winning on this floor as a the spread. New Orleans closed -1.5 here. Spread open 1. I've seen one sharper book has already got it as a pick 'em. What cost the Pelicans? Steve talked about how they weren't a dominant home team. They weren't as good at home as what you'd like to see. They also weren't very good in close games this year. That's why you see it, and that's often the culprit when you see a team that has a point differential that's really good, and yet, their one-loss record doesn't match up with it. That there's a difference between Pythagorean and actual wins there. So, yeah, I would agree. Zion Williamson has to have a big game here. The Pelicans, they had the stinker in the in-season tournament against the Lakers as well, as you recall. But it's interesting that when the Lakers visited New Orleans on New Year's Eve, granted, it's New Year's Eve. You don't know who knows where the players' minds are. The Pelicans closed as a 6.5 point favorite in that game.
Yep.
And they closed as a favorite in LA in February, right before the All-Star break. I looked this up. James and Davis were both in the lineup. That wasn't a situation where one or both guys took the night off. So it's interesting to kind of just, look at the progression where the odds makers have had these two teams rated for these matchups, because this is obviously similar to what we saw Sunday, as you'd expect. But earlier in the year, the Pelicans were clearly power rated as the stronger team, as is evident that they were a 6.5 point favorite here at home. Won and covered, by the way. That was their only win in the season series against the Lakers. And then, as I mentioned, they were a 3-point favorite in LA right before the All-Star break.
Yeah, I'm not buying the market. I'm going against it. I still think points are coming in this one. LA on a 16-6 to the over run heading into this game. The Pelicans down a stretch, 6-2 to the over in their last 8. I am not buying Father Time on the Lakers side somehow going to be laying out in the play-in game and pulling out all the defensive stops. Hell no. They're going to want to score some points in this one. And I think that's exactly what we are going to get here. Don't forget, hit that subscribe button. If you're new to us here at WagerTalk TV, we certainly appreciate it. Follow us on Instagram and thumbs up Yeah, that thumbs up button. We'd be much appreciative if you went ahead and hit that, as we're going to move on to the east side, because again, if you're just joining us, the Philadelphia Flyers have taken precedent over the Philadelphia Sixers. They still have to play a game that means nothing, and that means we get 2 East games on Wednesday. And we talked about the Miami Heat here, Merril. We talked about it last year. It was fun. It was profitable. It's the one team that we could say, have they looked great? Are they in great form? Can you say definitively that Miami is not capable of doing what they did a year ago? It's the one team that no matter what they look like, you have to go, yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the one betting against them. And Jimmy Butler and company end up, winning this game and then winning the first series, and off and running they are.
Well, the good news for whoever wins this is that they're in the playoffs, or the 7th seed. The good news for whoever loses is they play the winner of the Atlanta-Chicago game, and all they have to do is win that at home. So it does look like it's going to be Miami and Philly in one order or the other, being the 7-8 seeds when it's all said and done. Philly's a dangerous team, but have they fully worked Embiid back in? Maxey was in and out for months at a time. Harris was hurt. Miami does have that championship pedigree, more so than Philly. Philly's kind of underachieved in recent years. I know they had a little Harden honeymoon there for a while, and we'll talk about the Clippers later this week with the Harden honeymoon maybe ending there against Dallas. But yeah, I think this will be a great game, but it really probably is not going to end up mattering, because I think both these teams get in regardless. And I think there's a huge drop-off between Miami and Chicago versus these two, as opposed to Golden State, maybe Sacramento, but most likely Golden State versus the Lakers or Pelicans. So we'll see who comes to play. But yeah, Miami has a tendency to show up when they need to. Do they really feel like they need to show up here on the road because they know they get a home game against a kind of a bottom feeder if they do lose?
Yeah, I mean, what are you thinking here, BP, with the Sixers? I mean, they got a jolt down the stretch, right? They stayed afloat long enough to get Embiid back. He's got a lot less wear and tear on those legs now than he would have if he had to finish out the season. Couldn't they be? Sure. But again, it's, this is the kind of situation Miami is all about. This is what, what is Heat culture? Well, the Heat culture is they win this damn game, get into the playoffs, and they're off and running here. How much faith do you have in them going up against Philly? And really, like Steve said, does it make a difference? Both these teams are advancing anyway. Is that what you're thinking?
Yes, that's hashtag Heat culture, by the way, Joe. Yes, I would concur with my colleague from the Commonwealth of Virginia here that there is a big gap between these two and the bottom. I mean, Chicago and Atlanta are just what we call low ceiling teams, negative point differentials, negative net efficiencies, not going to make a run. Although it should be pointed out, in the play-in tourney last year, Joe, as you recall, Chicago looked like they had Miami beat at one point, and the Heat came back and went on their big run. We should also mention something else, that if things work out a certain way, if Philly wins this game on Wednesday and the Heat were to win the second win on Friday and become the 8th seed, it would be Boston and Miami in the first round. So earlier in the show, we were all kind of saying, oh my goodness, the Celtics, what a great spot there. They probably don't want to see the Heat in the first round, I think. Philadelphia closed the regular season like gangbusters, 8 straight wins, 10 straight covers. I think what's real interesting, though, is Miami, an uncharacteristic, Joe, 9-1 to the over their last 10 games. At least on the road, that is not indicative of what they did. They were 27-14 to the under on the road this year, 23-11 as an underdog to the under this season. The only problem is here, because I think the spread for both these East games is very spot on. I'm not showing any value there, but the problem is if you want to bet the under on this game, this total is low. I mean, it is real low. Atlanta, Chicago is the one game where we've seen some money come in on the over, and I can understand that because Atlanta plays no defense and plays with pace, but Chicago plays slow, which might kind of be the bugaboo there. But I don't know. Philadelphia's a red-hot team that I wouldn't want to get in front of, but Miami, what they did last year, do you really want to lay points against them? It seems a little scary. I expect both these teams will be in the top 8, no doubt. And then that Chicago-Atlanta game, I don't know. It's just 2 low-ceiling teams that I don't have much affinity for, quite frankly.
All right. I think they should just light a match and start both of those teams from scratch and just call it a season there, because it is going to be pretty laughable what happens there. Cody had a great comment in the chat room saying, if Embiid doesn't get injured, this team probably finishes as a 2 or maybe a 3 seed. And I agree, they're not in the play-in game if Embiid doesn't. But we're going to see if that benefits, less wear and tear on Embiid. We're going to see whether or not that works for their betterment. But don't forget, Butler, same thing. A couple of years ago, the Eastern Conference semis, Jimmy, 27.5, 7.5 boards, 5.5 assists to lead them to the next round. So he does get up for whatever reason, Merril. Jimmy Butler's all about the Sixers and showing up and just being, I guess maybe he wasn't all that happy with the way things ended with them. But, it's got to be, it's all about Jimmy Butler in this game and moving forward in the playoffs anyway. Is there any value on the Heat maybe in the futures market that you would think, or do you think they have just become the trendy dog because of their past history here?
Well, a couple things. Excellent point, guys, about how Miami was fortunate to even win the play-in game last year against Chicago. I'd forgotten all about that. And boy, does that not remind you of NC State's the third ACC tournament game, down by 6 with a minute to go, a 3-pointer at the buzzer to force overtime against Virginia. Oh, by the way, I had Virginia in that game, so maybe that's why I remember. Yet another burn by the Wolfpack here in the month of March. Glad the NBA playoffs are here, though, folks. Something I'll point out, too, 3 of the 4 games we have seen money on the under. And you mentioned, Joe, that Atlanta-Chicago game is the only one we've seen some money on the over. Elimination games, and especially Game 7s. Game 7s on the blind have been under winners for decades in the NBA playoffs. And so in elimination games often as well. So you could call these Game 7s. Technically, the 7-8 game is a Game 6. But these 9-10 games are definitely Game 7. So that's something to keep in mind as well. They are elimination games. And it is really important, as Bryan said, that Miami-Philly win, because then they get the 7th seed. And it's a huge difference in being the 8th seed, because then you avoid Boston for several rounds. You would avoid Boston until the conference finals instead of having to play them in the first round. So Miami should be focused, but so should Philly. Should be a great game for that reason. As far as the futures, I would wait, Joe, and see if they get the 7th seed or not, because if they're the 8th seed or they don't get in at all, you've saved yourself a wager, right? Because I don't see them beating Miami, beating Boston, especially with Boston having revenge after being eliminated by Miami. So the only time I'd be interested in the Heat future would be if they get the 7th seed, which means they need to win outright as a 4.5-point dog tomorrow Wednesday at Philly.
Yeah, Embiid knee doesn't seem all that healthy to me, Have says, and I was thinking the same thing as I watched them play here down the stretch. So it's a marathon. It's not a sprint in the NBA playoffs. So should be interesting to see how that turns out. And BP, I believe you on a game tomorrow have a 5% best bet. Is that correct?
That is correct, Joe. We are a perfect 6-0 all time since joining WagerTalk with 5% NBA plays. All 6 of those were last season. So this is our first 5% NBA play of the season. First 5% play in any sport in over 2 months. So very, very excited about what we've got cooking tomorrow. I'll be on WagerTalk today with, I believe it's Prez and Teddy. If not, it's Steve and Teddy. I'll have to reconsult my schedule there. Regardless, it will be a very good time. And you can head on over to my page, wt.buzz/BP, to pick up that very rare 5% NBA winner. Also have 3 plays tonight in Major League Baseball if you are so inclined.
Shout out Cannon Dodd, go Heat, screaming in there. No. He must be, there's, you know who that is there, Merril.
He's back.
I think
he's back.
Yes, he is back. Shouting out to Coach
Cannon, are you actually watching this time?
Good stuff.
He told me at practice last week. He goes, I saw you on there. I go, Cannon, I gave you a whole 1-minute shout out. He goes, I wasn't watching after that. He typed in and literally moved on. That's the 15-second attention span I was explaining to you guys last week about coaching these 5th and 6th graders. It is so difficult. So damn it, Cannon. I hope you're still watching this gambling sports show more than just 10 seconds. It's good for you. Counts as math
he's
credit.
like, oh, look, a squirrel. Oh, wow. Okay.
You bet Cannon also.
Know it well. Well. How about you, Merril? What do you got locked and loaded, ready to roll here tonight at WagerTalk?
I've got a strong baseball best bet. We have 14 baseball games tonight. I know there's no NBA yet, but there's 14 baseball. I've isolated what I think is the easiest over on the card, a high-scoring slugfest.
Woo.
Joe Raineri loves these because he can have his cognac by the 5th inning. So let's cash this one early and big. And also, let's look at the NBA playoffs starting tomorrow on Tuesday. I'm number one this season. I'm number one all time in the NBA at Wager Talk, and also went 29-17 last year in the playoffs alone as part of that 103-63 2023 NBA. So it is a great moneymaker year after year, the NBA postseason. Baseball, NBA, you don't have to decide. How about that 30-day get 7 more free that expires tonight at midnight? We only have hours remaining to get a discounted 30-day package. It's less than a normal 30-day. And then on top of that, they're adding 7 more days for free. It's a fantastic offer, but it expires. It's every baseball and basketball for the next 37 days and nights. Steve Merril, WagerTalk.com. And oh, by the way, 2 free baseball plays as well on my page right now for Monday night.
Oh, I love it. And how about another opinion or two, guys? Our good friend Mark Zinno rolled out a couple of best bets in these games coming up tomorrow. Check it out. The link is in the description here below. You're definitely going to want to hear what he has to say, as he, too, has been rolling in the NBA, and nobody's got more content when it comes to the NBA playoffs than we will here. So we certainly appreciate you stopping by. Don't forget that thumbs up would be much appreciative. We are also back again tomorrow, another edition of the NBA Tip-Off Show. We'll keep breaking these games down, seeing where the market goes, seeing who might be in, who might be out. The bottom line is we have got you covered when it comes to the NBA playoffs. And really, all you have to do is just check out that video on your screen right now, and you'll get access to all the big game breakdowns of all the games, the big games coming up this week. Until tomorrow, best of luck. We'll see you again soon.